Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Mask of Normalcy. Vince Cordova stared at the blueprints spread across his desk, his calloused hands tracing the lines of the luxury home he was building for a tech executive in Aspen. At 42, Vince had built Cordova Construction into one of the most sought-after firms for high-end custom homes in Colorado. His weathered face, with its permanent tan from years on construction sites, rarely showed emotion, a trait he'd developed growing up with an alcoholic father who'd beat him for the slightest sign of weakness. "Boss," the supplier called. "They're short on the Italian marble again," said Duke, his foreman of 15 years. Vince's jaw tightened. "Call Bronson at Alpine Imports. Tell him if he can't deliver what he promised, I'll make sure every developer in 3 states knows his word is worth shit." Duke nodded, knowing that Vince never made empty threats. He'd seen what happened to people who crossed his boss. Vince had clawed his way up from nothing, from the son of a violent drunk in a trailer park to the owner of a multi-million-dollar company, and he'd broken plenty of people who tried to stand in his way. That evening, Vince drove his black F-350 into the circular driveway of his mountain estate outside Denver. He'd built the 8,000-square-foot home himself 5 years ago when his business had finally taken off. It was a monument to his success, with views of the Rockies from nearly every room. As he entered, he noticed Melanie's designer purse on the entryway table, but no sign of his wife. Their housekeeper, Rosa, greeted him nervously. "Mrs. Cordova say she have headache. She in bedroom since 3 o'clock." Vince nodded, unsurprised. Melanie's headaches had become more frequent over the past few months. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and walked to the master suite, knocking once before entering. Melanie lay on their king-sized bed in silk pajamas, scrolling through her phone. At 38, she was still stunning, her blonde hair perfectly highlighted, her body maintained by daily sessions with her personal trainer. When she saw Vince, she quickly locked her phone. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" "Productive," Vince replied, studying her face. "Your headache any better?" "A little," she said, adjusting the pillows behind her. "I don't think I'll make it to the Sullivans' dinner party tonight." Vince sipped his bourbon. "I'll tell them you're sick." "Thanks, babe." Melanie's eyes didn't meet his. "You should still go?" "Brandy Sullivan said her brother-in-law will be there, the one developing that resort in Vail." Vince watched her a moment longer before nodding. "I'll be back by midnight." As he showered and changed into a tailored suit, Vince thought about how distant Melanie had become. When they'd met 10 years ago, she'd been working at an art gallery in Denver, the daughter of old money who'd rebelled against her parents by dating a rough-around-the-edges contractor. The sex had been explosive, the connection intense. Her parents had hated him, which only seemed to make her want him more. But the past year had been different. The passion had cooled. The conversation had dried up. And lately, there was something else. A guardedness in her eyes, a new password on her phone, late-night texts she claimed were from girlfriends. Vince wasn't a fool. He'd grown up watching his mother make excuses for her mysterious phone calls until the day she'd finally left them for another man. He recognized the signs. As he adjusted his tie in the mirror, Vince made a decision. It was time to find out exactly what his wife was hiding. Chapter 2. Beneath the Surface. The Sullivans' dinner party was tedious, but Vince played his part, charming the developers, closing a deal over dessert with a handshake that would add another $1 million to his company's annual revenue. He left at 11, but instead of heading home, he parked a block away and called Duke. "You still got that buddy who does security work?" Vince asked without preamble. "Wolf?" "Yeah, he's solid. What do you need?" "Have him meet me at my office tomorrow. 7 a.m. sharp." Vince ended the call and sat in his truck, watching the houses along the quiet street. Most were dark, their wealthy owners asleep. He thought about the life he'd built, the respect he'd earned. Nobody knew the rage that simmered beneath his controlled exterior, the childhood trauma he'd buried beneath success and money. Nobody except Melanie. She'd seen glimpses of his darkness during their early days together, and it had excited her then. The next morning, Perry Wolf sat across from Vince in his office. The ex-military security specialist had the blank eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "I need surveillance equipment," Vince said. "The best you've got. Cameras, audio recorders, trackers, all of it undetectable." Wolf didn't ask questions. "When and where?" "My house. Tomorrow while my wife's at her spa appointment." "It'll cost you." Vince slid an envelope across the desk. Half now, half when it's done. 2 days later, Vince had access to everything. Footage from tiny cameras hidden in light fixtures throughout their home, audio from recorders concealed in wall outlets, GPS tracking on Melanie's Mercedes, and spyware on her personal laptop. For a week, nothing happened. Melanie shopped, had lunch with friends, went to yoga. Vince started to think maybe he'd been paranoid. Then on Tuesday afternoon, his phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected in the master bedroom. Melanie should have been at her volunteer shift at the art museum. Vince opened the app and watched as his wife entered their bedroom with a man he recognized immediately, Bradford Blaze Reynolds, the hotshot real estate developer who'd moved to their neighborhood 6 months ago. The divorced father of two had a reputation as a playboy, driving a bright red Ferrari and hosting lavish pool parties at his modernist mansion 3 streets over. Vince's hands tightened on his phone as he watched Blaze push Melanie against the wall, kissing her neck as she laughed. They moved to the bed he'd shared with her for years, and Vince forced himself to watch every moment of their passionate encounter. When it was over, they lay together, talking. Vince turned up the volume. God, when is he leaving for that Seattle project? Blaze asked, stroking Melanie's hair. Next month. 2 weeks in Washington, then straight to the Idaho site. We'll have plenty of time together. You could always leave him now, Blaze suggested. My place is big enough. Melanie sighed. It's complicated. The prenup. How bad is it? If I leave him, I get basically nothing. This has to be handled delicately. Blaze kissed her shoulder. Well, I'm a patient man. For you. Vince closed the app, a cold fury settling in his chest. So Melanie was waiting for him to leave town before continuing her affair, concerned about the prenup he'd insisted on despite her family's objections. Delicate handling. That's what she thought this required. He would show her just how indelicate things could get. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. For the next 2 weeks, Vince bided his time. He continued to track Melanie's movements and communications while maintaining a normal facade. He was polite at breakfast, asked about her day, and even took her to dinner at her favorite restaurant. All while planning. He learned the rhythm of their affair. Tuesdays and Thursdays when Melanie was supposedly volunteering, occasional rendezvous at Blaze's house when his children were with their mother. He discovered their text exchanges under a fake contact in Melanie's phone labeled Brenda, Art Gallery. He read messages where they fantasized about their future together once Vince was out of the picture. What infuriated him most wasn't the sex. It was the laughter, the intimacy, the way Melanie opened up to Blaze in ways she hadn't with him in years. She complained about Vince's long hours, his rough manners, his emotional unavailability. She mocked his background, calling him the guy from the trailer park who still thinks he has something to prove. Each discovery was another knife in his back, but Vince compartmentalized his rage. He'd learned long ago that revenge served cold was far more satisfying. At work, he contacted his attorney, Howard Greenblatt, a shark in an expensive suit who'd helped Vince navigate his business expansion. I need everything ready for a divorce, Vince told him. I want to enforce every clause of the prenup. I want her to walk away with nothing but her clothes. Howard raised an eyebrow. You have evidence of infidelity? More than enough. Bring it to me, and I'll have everything prepared. But Vince, the Prestons have connections. This won't be pretty. Vince smiled thinly. I'm counting on it. That weekend, Vince invited his oldest friend, Boyd Rollins, over for drinks while Melanie was at her parents' country club. Boyd had been with him since high school, the only person who'd stood by him when everyone else had written him off as white trash destined for prison. They sat on the deck overlooking the mountains, whiskey in hand. You remember Danny Sikowski? Vince asked suddenly. Boyd frowned. The guy who stole your construction equipment when you were just starting out? Nearly bankrupted you. Vince nodded, taking a slow sip. Got a call last week. He's selling used cars in Arizona now, living in a shitty apartment, drinking himself to sleep every night. Karma's a bitch. It wasn't karma, Vince said quietly. It was me. It took 5 years, but I made sure he lost everything. His business, his reputation, his wife. He never even knew I was behind it. Boyd studied his friend. Why are you telling me this now? Vince stared at the sunset, painting the mountains red. Because Melanie's cheating on me with Blaze Reynolds. And I'm going to destroy them both. Boyd was silent for a long moment. What do you need from me? Just be ready. When this goes down, it's going to get ugly. The night before his planned trip to Seattle, Vince installed one final recording device, this one in plain sight. He placed his phone on the nightstand, a new app running that would activate with his voice command. That night, as they lay in bed, Melanie seemed almost nervous. "I'm going to miss you," she said, not looking at him. Vince studied the ceiling. "It's just 2 weeks." "I know. It's just, we've been distant lately. Maybe when you get back, we could take a trip together. Try to reconnect." The audacity of her lie made his blood boil, but he kept his voice even. "Maybe. We'll talk when I get back." The next morning, he packed his bags and left them by the door. He kissed Melanie goodbye, told her he'd call when he landed, and drove away. But he didn't go to the airport. Instead, he parked down the street, switched vehicles to Boyd's pickup truck, and waited. 2 hours later, right on schedule, Blaze's Ferrari pulled into his driveway. Vince gave them 30 minutes before quietly entering his own home through the garage using a code Melanie didn't know existed. He moved silently up the back stairs, hearing the sounds of passion from the master bedroom. He had everything he needed, but he wanted more. He wanted Melanie to reveal her true nature, to incriminate herself beyond any doubt. It was time for a confrontation that would change everything. Chapter 4: The Breaking Point. Vince waited in the guest room until evening, monitoring the house through his phone. He watched as Blaze finally left around 6, promising to return the next day. He observed Melanie ordering takeout, drinking 2 glasses of wine, and taking a long bath. His patience was glacial, honed by years of waiting for the right moment to strike in business deals. At 11, he activated his plan. Using his phone, he remotely triggered the house alarm, its piercing wail breaking the night's silence. He heard Melanie's startled scream, followed by her footsteps running to the control panel. By the time she'd silenced it, Vince had positioned himself in the kitchen, sitting calmly at the island with a glass of bourbon. When Melanie entered, she froze. Her face drained of color. "Vince, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Seattle." "Clearly," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "We need to talk, Melanie." She gathered herself quickly, smoothing her silk robe. "Your flight got canceled? You should have called. It's interesting that your first concern isn't why I'm here, but why I didn't warn you I was coming back to my own home." Something in his tone must have alerted her. Her eyes darted to the stairs, calculating escape routes. "You're being weird. If something's wrong, just say it." Vince took a deliberate sip of bourbon. "Blaze seemed to enjoy himself today. Does he always leave bite marks on your neck, or was that a special occasion?" The blood drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't insult my intelligence," Vince said, sliding his phone across the counter. The screen showed a crystal-clear image of Melanie and Blaze in their bed from earlier that day. Her shock quickly morphed into defiance. "You've been spying on me? That's illegal." Vince laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "That's your concern? Not that you've been fucking another man in our bed for months." Melanie's chin lifted, her aristocratic upbringing surfacing in her posture. "What did you expect, Vince? You're never here. And when you are, you're distant, cold. Do you know how long it's been since you've actually seen me? Really seen me?" "Spare me the justifications," Vince said, standing. "I'm not interested in your excuses." "It's not an excuse, it's a reason." Melanie's voice rose. "You built this beautiful house, but it's never been a home. You're obsessed with proving yourself, with your precious business. You've given me everything except what actually matters." Vince moved closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And that gives you the right to betray me? To laugh at me behind my back? To mock where I came from?" Melanie's eyes widened, revealing that she understood how much he knew. Her strategy shifted instantly. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. We can fix this, go to counseling, take that trip I mentioned." "There's nothing to fix," Vince said, turning away. "I'm filing for divorce. Your prenup is ironclad. You'll get nothing." Panic flashed across her face. "You can't do that. 15 years together, and you'd throw it all away?" 10 years, he corrected coldly. "And you threw it away, not me." Something snapped in Melanie then. Her beautiful face contorted with rage. "This is why I turned to Blaze. You're so fucking cold, so unforgiving. You're incapable of love, Vince. You're still that damaged boy from the trailer park, just with better clothes and a bigger house." Vince didn't react, which only infuriated her more. "I wish you were dead," she screamed, grabbing a crystal tumbler and hurling it against the wall, where it shattered. "My life would be so much easier." The words hung in the air between them. Vince stared at her, memorizing the hatred in her eyes, the flush on her cheeks, the heaving of her chest. "Is that right?" he said quietly. Something in his tone made her step back. For the first time, real fear crept into her expression. "I didn't mean that," she said quickly. "I'm upset. You spied on me, confronted me like this." "No, I think you did mean it," Vince said. "And that's valuable information." He walked past her toward the stairs. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, you'll hear from my lawyer." "Vince, please." He turned at the stairs. "One more thing, Melanie. Tell Blaze if he enters my property again, what happens next won't be a conversation." That night, Vince lay awake, refining his plan. Melanie's outburst had given him an idea, one that would expose her true nature beyond any doubt and set the stage for his ultimate revenge. Chapter 5: The Deception. At 5:30 a.m., Vince quietly entered the master bathroom and removed items from his medical cabinet. A bottle of sleeping pills he'd been prescribed after a back injury, a small vial of syrup of Ipecac he'd acquired from Boyd's wife, a nurse, and a makeup kit from his company's last commercial photo shoot. He crushed 2 sleeping pills into a fine powder, mixed them with water, and drank the solution. Not enough to cause real harm, but sufficient to slow his heart rate and breathing. Then he placed the Ipecac nearby. Its emetic properties would create convincing symptoms when needed. Next came the makeup, subtle shadows under his eyes, a pallid complexion. Looking in the mirror, he appeared ill, potentially even near death to an untrained eye. Satisfied, he activated the recording app on his phone and positioned it on the nightstand, partially hidden by a book, but with the camera lens unobstructed. He returned to the guest bed and waited for the mild sedative to take effect, his mind clear despite the drug's influence. The trap was set. 2 hours later, Melanie knocked tentatively on the guest room door. "Vince, I made coffee." When he didn't respond, she knocked louder. "Vince, we need to talk." After a third attempt, she opened the door. Vince lay motionless on the bed, his breathing shallow, his skin pale. "Vince." Her voice held concern now. She approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" He remained still, eyelids heavy from the medication. She touched his shoulder, then shook him. "Vince, wake up." He let his arm fall limply off the bed, showing the empty pill bottle he'd planted on the floor. Melanie gasped, grabbing his wrist to check his pulse. "Oh God, oh God," she muttered, her fingers trembling. She ran to the bathroom, returned with a wet cloth that she pressed to his forehead. "Vince, can you hear me? Wake up." When there was no response, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine panic. "I need an ambulance. My husband, I think he took pills. He's not responding. Please hurry." She gave their address, following the dispatcher's instructions to check if he was breathing. As soon as she hung up, Vince watched through slitted eyes as she immediately made another call. "Blaze? Oh God, I think it happened. He found out about us yesterday. We had a huge fight, and now," her voice dropped to a whisper, "it worked. He's gone. There's an empty pill bottle. The ambulance is coming, but he's not responding at all." She listened for a moment. "No, don't come here. There'll be police. I'll call you when they leave. We need to be careful now." Another pause. "I know, baby. Our nightmare is finally over. We can be together now." She ended the call just as sirens became audible in the distance. Quickly, she rumpled her hair, pinched her cheeks to redden them, and wiped at her eyes to create the appearance of tears. As the sirens grew closer, Vince subtly took the Ipecac. Within seconds, his body responded naturally. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, his breathing became labored, and nausea hit him in waves. He began to moan, his eyes fluttering. Melanie rushed back to his side, her expression changing rapidly from calculation to artificial concern as paramedics pounded on the front door. "Up here," she called out, her voice breaking convincingly. "Please hurry." 2 paramedics entered with their equipment, followed by a police officer, standard procedure for possible suicide attempts. "Ma'am, please step back," said the female paramedic, kneeling beside Vince. "Sir, can you hear me?" Vince groaned, his eyes opening slowly as the paramedic checked his vitals. Pulse is steady but slow. Pupils responsive. "Sir, did you take medication?" This was the moment. Vince looked directly at Melanie, who had transformed into the picture of a distraught wife for their audience. "I'm not gone," he said clearly, reaching for his phone. And neither is this recording. He held up his phone, the screen displaying the video of Melanie's call to Blaze. The color drained from her face as understanding dawned. "What's going on here?" the police officer asked, looking between them. "Officer," Vince said, sitting up despite the paramedics' protests, "I'd like to play something for you." As the recording played, Melanie's voice crystal clear as she said, "It worked. He's gone." The room grew deathly quiet. The paramedics exchanged uncomfortable glances. The police officer's expression hardened. What Melanie did next shocked everyone in the room. She lunged for the phone, screaming, "You manipulative bastard." Her manicured nails raked across Vince's face, drawing blood before the police officer could pull her away. "Ma'am, stop. Right now," the officer commanded, restraining her as she continued to thrash and scream obscenities. "He set me up. He's trying to frame me. He's the one who's abusive." The male paramedic stepped between them. "Sir, did you take any medication?" "2 sleeping pills," Vince admitted. "I needed to appear unresponsive. I suspected my wife was having an affair and planning something dangerous. I needed evidence." "This is a domestic situation," the officer said, still restraining Melanie. "But that recording, ma'am, you said it worked. He's gone. Were you referring to your husband's apparent medical emergency?" "She was," Vince said calmly. "Last night during an argument, she screamed that she wished I was dead, that her life would be easier. I have that recorded too. That's not a crime." Melanie spat. "Everyone says things they don't mean in fights." "No," the officer agreed. "But celebrating someone's apparent suicide attempt and discussing how it worked suggests prior knowledge or intent. I need to call this in." As the officer radioed for backup, explaining the situation, Melanie's demeanor changed again. The rage drained away, replaced by calculated charm. "Officer, this is all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice honeyed. "My husband and I are going through a difficult time. He discovered my indiscretion, and he's understandably hurt. But this elaborate setup," she gestured around the room, "this is a symptom of his control issues. Ask anyone. He's known for his ruthlessness." The officer's face remained impassive. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "Am I being arrested?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "Not at this time. But we need to investigate what happened here." As additional officers arrived, Vince was checked by the paramedics, who confirmed he was in no medical danger. He provided copies of both recordings to the police and gave a statement detailing the events leading up to that morning. Melanie was escorted to the police station, her protests about Vince's manipulation and setup falling on deaf ears as the evidence of her call to Blaze continued to play on repeat in everyone's minds. As the house finally emptied, Vince sat alone on the edge of the guest bed, the taste of victory mingling with the bitter remnants of the ipecac. This was only the beginning. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. Detective Lena Morris sat across from Vince in an interview room at the Denver police station, her sharp eyes assessing him as she reviewed his statement. At 45, she had the weary competence of someone who'd seen every variety of human deception. "Let me make sure I understand, Mr. Cordova," she said. "You suspected your wife was having an affair, so you installed surveillance equipment in your own home." "Legal in Colorado," Vince interrupted. "Single-party consent state." "I'm aware of the law," she replied evenly. "You then faked a medical emergency to trick your wife into revealing." "What exactly?" "That she was glad you might be dying. That she and her lover had discussed or planned something that worked when I appeared to be dead," Vince corrected. "Listen to her exact words again. It worked. He's gone." That suggests prior intention, not just opportunistic celebration. Detective Morris played the recording once more, her expression thoughtful. "It's certainly concerning language, but without more evidence of an actual plot to harm you. This is primarily a domestic dispute with potential charges of assault when she attacked you." Vince touched the scratch marks on his face. "I don't care about these. What I care about is that my wife and Blaze Reynolds were potentially planning something more permanent than an affair." "We've brought Mr. Reynolds in for questioning," Morris said. "But without concrete evidence of conspiracy to commit harm, there's a limit to what charges we can pursue." Vince leaned forward. "Then let me help you find that evidence." For hours later, Vince left the police station with Detective Morris's card and a temporary restraining order against Melanie. Howard Greenblatt was waiting in the lobby, his expensive suit immaculate despite the late hour. You've created quite a situation, the attorney said as they walked to his Bentley. Melanie's father has already called their family lawyer, Ainsworth from Gilbert and Stern. I'm not concerned, Vince replied, sliding into the passenger seat. Did you file the divorce papers? This morning, as instructed. Given the evidence of infidelity, the prenup is solid. She gets nothing from your assets or business. And the house. Yours. You owned the land before marriage and built it with company resources. Vince nodded, staring out the window as they drove. She'll fight it. Of course. The Prestons never lose gracefully. Howard glanced at him. There's something else you should know. 20 minutes after I filed the papers, someone attempted to access your business accounts. The security measures we put in place blocked it, but the attempt came from your home IP address. Vince wasn't surprised. Melanie has never had access to those accounts, which means she's either gotten your passwords somehow, or Blaze is helping her, Vince finished. He's in real estate and finance. He'd know how to move money discreetly. Howard pulled up to the Four Seasons Hotel. I've arranged a suite for you. I assume you don't want to return home tonight. Not yet. There's something I need to do first. Vince handed Howard a USB drive. This contains all the surveillance footage and recordings. There are conversations between Melanie and Blaze from the past month. Review them for anything that might suggest they were planning to harm me or steal from me. Vince, Howard said cautiously, what exactly are you planning? Justice, Vince replied, opening the car door. Nothing more, nothing less. In his hotel suite, Vince showered, washing away the makeup and the lingering effects of the morning's performance. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from Melanie, alternating between tearful apologies and vicious threats. He ignored them all. Instead, he called Boyd. It's done, he said when his friend answered. Phase 1 anyway. You okay? Boyd asked. Never better. Did you make contact? Yeah. The bartender at Blaze's Country Club, the valet at the hotel they used twice, and his ex-wife. The ex is particularly interested in helping. Apparently, Blaze has been trying to reduce his child support payments while driving a Ferrari. Good. Tell them all I'll pay double whatever Blaze does for information. I want to know everyone he talks to, everywhere he goes, every weakness he has. You got it. What about Melanie? Vince's voice hardened. She's going to find out what it really means to have nothing. Over the next week, Vince orchestrated his revenge with surgical precision. He remained at the hotel while his home was processed as a potential crime scene due to Melanie's assault and the suspicious circumstances. Detective Morris called on the third day. Mr. Cordova, we've completed our investigation of your residence. You can return home whenever you wish. And my wife? Has she been charged? With assault, yes. The DA is still reviewing the recording evidence for additional charges of conspiracy, but it's not clear-cut. Mr. Reynolds maintains they were only discussing your divorce, not harming you. I understand, Vince said. Thank you for your thoroughness. One more thing, Morris added. While examining your home security system, we discovered something unusual. It appears someone installed additional cameras in your bedroom and office about 3 months ago, cameras that weren't part of your system. Vince's grip tightened on the phone. What are you saying? I'm saying your wife and her boyfriend may have been spying on you before you started spying on them. The cameras were connected to an external server. We're tracing it now. After hanging up, Vince sat motionless, absorbing this new information. Melanie and Blaze hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been monitoring him, perhaps looking for financial information or other vulnerabilities. His phone rang again. Howard, I've gone through the recordings, his attorney said without preamble. There's something you need to hear. An hour later, Vince sat in Howard's office, listening to a conversation between Melanie and Blaze recorded 3 weeks earlier. The Seattle trip is our opportunity, Blaze's voice said. I've got the account set up offshore. Once we have his passwords and transfer the money, it'll be untraceable. And if he notices before he leaves? Melanie asked. That sleeping medication you got works fast. 2 pills in his bourbon, and he'll be out cold. He'll never know what happened until it's too late. And with his temper and history, everyone will believe he just snapped when you tell them how abusive he's been. I'm just worried, Melanie said. He's not a forgiving man. He can't hurt you if he's ruined, Blaze assured her. By the time he realizes what happened, we'll be sipping champagne in the Caymans, and he'll be facing fraud charges. The recording ended, leaving a heavy silence in the office. They were planning to drug me, steal my money, and frame me for financial crimes, Vince said quietly. And Melanie was going to claim I'd been abusing her. Howard nodded grimly. I've sent this to Detective Morris. This changes everything. Vince stood, a cold clarity washing over him. No, Howard. This just confirms what I already knew. Now it's time for Phase 2. Chapter 7. The Hunter. 2 days later, Melanie and Blaze were arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, illegal surveillance, and assault. Their mugshots appeared on the local news, alongside the salacious details of their affair and plot against Vince. Melanie's parents immediately posted her bail, whisking her away to their estate in Cherry Hills. Blaze, however, spent 2 nights in jail before his brother secured his release. Vince watched it all unfold from a strategic distance. He returned to his home, removing every trace of Melanie, her clothes, her art, her precious collected souvenirs. He had them packed and delivered to her parents' gate with cold efficiency. At work, he appeared unaffected, closing deals and overseeing projects with his usual intensity. But inside, he was calculating every move in a complex game of destruction. Boyd provided regular reports on Blaze and Melanie's movements. They were still seeing each other, meeting at a rented condo under a business associate's name, believing they were being discreet. They seem to think they can beat the charges, Boyd reported. Blaze's lawyer is claiming the recordings were doctored, and any surveillance they did was just to gather evidence of your supposed abusive behavior. Vince smiled thinly. Let them think that. How's the other matter progressing? Perfectly. I found 3 former clients of Blaze's who had irregular experiences with him. One couple lost their life savings in a development that mysteriously went bankrupt right after Blaze sold his stake. Another found out their vacation property had undisclosed structural defects that Blaze's inspection company had hidden. And they're willing to testify? They're eager to. Turns out, Blaze has left a trail of enemies wider than even you anticipated. Vince nodded, satisfied. And Melanie's new narrative? She's telling everyone who'll listen that you manipulated and controlled her for years, that she turned to Blaze out of desperation. She's playing the victim hard. Her mother's society friends are rallying around her. As expected, Vince said calmly, people believe what they want to believe, especially people who've always looked down on me. The next day, Vince met with Detective Morris, bringing additional evidence of Blaze and Melanie's plans. Financial records showing attempts to access his accounts, emails Melanie had drafted to friends describing Vince's fictional abuse, and the names of witnesses who could testify to Blaze's history of fraud. This is comprehensive, Morris said, examining the documents. You've been busy, Mr. Cordova. I protect what's mine, Vince replied simply, and I ensure those who try to take it from me face consequences. Morris studied him. The DA has concerns about your methods. The surveillance, the staged overdose. It shows a level of calculation that makes some uncomfortable. I broke no laws. I gathered evidence of an actual conspiracy against me. Would the DA prefer I'd remained ignorant until they'd succeeded in stealing my life's work and framing me for crimes I didn't commit? No, Morris conceded. But there's a fine line between self-protection and vigilantism. Vince met her gaze steadily. I'm aware of the line, Detective. I've never crossed it. Not yet, anyway. That evening, Vince received a call from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Cordova? This is Charlotte Reynolds, Blaze's ex-wife. Vince had been expecting this call. Mrs. Reynolds, thank you for reaching out. I've been following what happened, she said, her voice tense. It matches a pattern. When we were married, money went missing from our joint accounts. When I confronted him, he became frightening. And after our divorce, he tried to manipulate custody of our children to reduce his financial obligations. I'm sorry you experienced that. I'm not calling for sympathy, she said firmly. I'm calling because my children and I have information that might help your case. And because I want to make sure Blaze never does to anyone else what he did to us. I'd be interested in hearing more, Vince said, a new avenue of revenge opening before him. By midnight, he had recordings of Charlotte describing Blaze's history of financial manipulation, threats, and emotional abuse. He had statements from Blaze's children about witnessing their father's rages. He had documentation of hidden assets Blaze had never declared during his divorce. Vince forwarded it all to Detective Morris with a simple note. Justice isn't just about my case. The next morning, as he reviewed blueprints for a new project, Duke handed him a thick envelope. Guy delivered this. Said it's from Melanie's father. Inside was a settlement offer, $3 million in exchange for Vince dropping all charges and signing a non-disclosure agreement. Preston was trying to buy his daughter's way out of consequences, while simultaneously protecting the family name from scandal. Vince tore the document in half and sent the pieces back with a handwritten note. Not for sale. That afternoon, he received another call, this one from Blaze himself. We need to talk, Blaze said without preamble. This has gone too far. I disagree, Vince replied coldly. It hasn't gone nearly far enough. Look, I get it. You're angry. But dragging Charlotte and my kids into this, going after my business, that's crossing a line. You tried to steal everything from me, Vince reminded him. You plotted with my wife to drug me, frame me, and destroy me. What line wouldn't you have crossed? That was Melanie's idea. Blaze protested. She said you were abusive, controlling. Save it, Vince cut him off. You're both liars. The only difference is, she was born into privilege, while you clawed your way into it by stepping on others. In that way, we're not so different, you and I. Except I never pretended to be something I'm not. What do you want? Blaze finally asked, desperation creeping into his voice. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything, Vince said calmly. Just like you planned for me. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd never heard my name. He ended the call, a grim satisfaction settling over him. The hunter had become the hunted, and the prey was beginning to panic. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The media frenzy intensified as more details emerged about Blaze's business practices. 3 former associates came forward with allegations of fraud. Charlotte Reynolds gave an exclusive interview describing her ex-husband's pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. Blaze's company stock plummeted as investors withdrew support. Melanie, meanwhile, doubled down on her narrative of victimhood. She appeared on local news, tearfully describing years of alleged controlling behavior by Vince. Her parents flanked her protectively, the picture of a family supporting their wronged daughter. He's a master manipulator, she told the interviewer, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. He created this elaborate setup to frame me because he couldn't stand that I wanted to leave him. The interview might have swayed public opinion if not for what happened next. As Melanie left the television studio, she found Vince waiting by her car, the first time they'd faced each other since her arrest. What are you doing here? She demanded, her parents moving protectively to her side. I came to return something, Vince said calmly, holding out a small velvet box. Melanie took it cautiously. Inside was the diamond necklace he'd given her for their 5th anniversary. Keep your gifts, she said coldly, trying to hand it back. I don't want anything from you. It's not a gift, Vince replied. It's evidence. Before she could respond, Detective Morris appeared with 2 uniformed officers. Melanie Cordova, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, Morris announced, gesturing for the officers to proceed. What? This is ridiculous. Preston blustered as an officer handcuffed his daughter. What insurance fraud? Vince nodded to the necklace. 3 months ago, Melanie reported that necklace stolen from our home. Collected a $175,000 insurance payout. But she never filed a police report, just an insurance claim. Because the necklace wasn't stolen. You're lying, Melanie hissed, but her face had gone pale. The insurance company has been investigating, Morris explained. Mr. Cordova discovered the necklace hidden in a compartment in your closet safe. The one you thought he didn't know about. This is harassment. Preston shouted as the officers led Melanie to a waiting police car. I'll have your badge for this. Morris remained unfazed. Sir, I understand you're upset, but this is a legitimate arrest based on documented evidence. Your daughter committed insurance fraud. That's a felony. As Melanie was placed in the back of the police car, she locked eyes with Vince, her expression a mixture of hatred and dawning comprehension. She was beginning to understand the depth of his revenge, not just the legal consequences, but the systematic dismantling of her reputation, her freedom, her future. That evening, Vince received an unexpected visitor at his home. Sophia Preston, Melanie's younger sister, stood on his doorstep, her expression troubled. Can I come in? She asked quietly. Vince hesitated, then stepped aside. Unlike Melanie, Sophia had always been straightforward, less concerned with appearances and status. I'm not here to defend her, Sophia said as they sat in the living room. What Melanie and Blaze planned to do to you was inexcusable. Then why are you here? Sophia looked around the house, her eyes lingering on spaces where Melanie's possessions had once been. I'm worried about how far this will go. The insurance fraud charge, the conspiracy case, dragging Blaze's ex-wife and children into it. It feels like you won't stop until they're both destroyed completely. They tried to destroy me, Vince said simply. They're facing the consequences of their actions. Is that all this is? Justice? Sophia asked. Or is it about making them suffer because you're suffering? Vince's expression hardened. Don't mistake my methodical approach for emotional reaction. This isn't about heartbreak, Sophia. It's about principle. They betrayed me, plotted against me, tried to take everything I've built. I don't forgive betrayal. I never have. Even if it costs you a part of yourself. This vendetta, it's consuming you. I can see it. Vince stood, signaling the conversation was over. I appreciate your concern, but my conscience is clear. As Sophia left, her words lingered in Vince's mind. Was revenge consuming him? Perhaps, but he had come too far to stop now. The final phase of his plan was already in motion. The next morning, Howard called with news. The DA has offered Melanie a deal. She pleads guilty to insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit theft, serves 6 months, pays restitution, and the other charges are dropped. She'll take it, Vince said immediately. The Prestons will do anything to minimize public embarrassment. There's more. They want your approval on the deal, given that you're the victim. Vince considered this. Tell them I'll agree on one condition. Melanie has to make a public statement admitting everything. The affair, the plot against me, the false abuse claims. No sanitized version. The complete truth. They'll fight that, Howard warned. It would destroy what's left of her reputation. That's the point, Vince said coldly. She tried to destroy mine with lies. Let her face the consequences of the truth. Remarkably, after 2 days of negotiation, Melanie agreed. The Preston family's influence was considerable, but even they couldn't make multiple felony charges disappear completely. Accepting Vince's terms was their best option for damage control. Meanwhile, Blaze's situation deteriorated rapidly. The SEC launched an investigation into his business practices. Former clients filed lawsuits. His company's board forced him out to salvage what remained of their reputation. The final blow came when Charlotte Reynolds filed for full custody of their children and a recalculation of child support based on the hidden assets Vince had helped uncover. Desperate, Blaze reached out to Vince again. You've made your point, he said, his voice ragged. I've lost my company, my reputation, probably my kids. What more do you want? I told you what I wanted, Vince replied. For you to lose everything. Just like you planned for me. I can't undo what happened, Blaze said. But I can offer you something. Information about who else was involved. This caught Vince's attention. What do you mean, who else? Melanie and I weren't working alone. Someone helped us with the surveillance equipment, the offshore accounts. Someone who hates you almost as much as she ended up hating you. Vince's mind raced through possibilities. Give me a name. Blaze paused, calculating his leverage. If I do, will you back off? Let me keep something of my life. That depends on the name. Boyd Rollins. The words hit Vince like a physical blow. Boyd, his oldest friend, the one person he'd trusted completely. The betrayal was almost incomprehensible. You're lying, Vince said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Check your surveillance footage, Blaze suggested. The day Melanie claimed she was at her mother's charity luncheon, she was actually meeting with Boyd. He's the one who suggested drugging you. He's the one who installed the cameras in your house. He's been working against you for months. After hanging up, Vince combed through his surveillance archives, looking for evidence that would disprove Blaze's claim. Instead, he found confirmation. A brief conversation between Melanie and Boyd in his home office when they thought no one was watching. Boyd showing her how to access Vince's computer files. Melanie kissing Boyd's cheek in a gesture that suggested intimacy beyond friendship. The revelation shook Vince to his core. But as the initial shock faded, cold determination took its place. If Boyd had betrayed him too, then Boyd would face the same fate as the others. No one who betrayed Vince Cordova escaped unpunished. No one. Chapter 9. The Judgment. 3 months later, Vince stood alone on the deck of his mountain home, watching the sunset paint the Rockies in shades of fire. The changing seasons mirrored the transformation of his own life, a painful burning away of falsehoods, leaving only hard, clean truth behind. Melanie had served her first month in the minimum security women's facility, her public confession having aired on every local news channel. The Prestons had retreated from Denver society, rumors suggesting they were selling their estate and relocating to Europe to escape the humiliation. Blaze faced multiple federal indictments for securities fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. His ex-wife had been granted full custody of their children, and the court had tripled his child support obligations based on the evidence of hidden assets. Last Vince had heard, Blaze was living in a one-bedroom apartment, his Ferrari long gone, working as a sales associate at a struggling real estate office that had taken pity on him. And Boyd had proven the most challenging target. Unlike Melanie and Blaze, he recognized Vince's methods immediately and tried to disappear. But Vince had resources and patience. It had taken only 3 weeks to track Boyd to a remote cabin in Wyoming. Their confrontation had been brief but intense. Why? Vince had asked, standing in the cabin's doorway as Boyd frantically packed a duffel bag. After everything we've been through, why betray me? Boyd had frozen, then slowly turned to face his former friend. You really don't know? After all these years, you still don't see it. See what? How you use people, Boyd had said, his voice tight with resentment. Everyone in your life is just a tool to help you get what you want. Your employees, your so-called friends, Melanie, we're all just means to an end for you. That's not true, Vince had protested. I trusted you. I would have done anything for you. No, you would have done anything to keep me loyal to you. There's a difference. Boyd had zipped his bag decisively. And when Melanie realized the same thing about you, that she was just another possession you'd acquired, she reached out to me. We connected over our shared experience of being collateral damage in your rise to success. So you helped her in her lover plan to destroy me? Out of what spite? At first, I just listened to her, Boyd had admitted. Then I started to see that everything she said was true. You don't care about people, Vince. You care about control, about winning, about making sure no one ever looks down on you again. And that justifies planning to drug me, steal from me, frame me? No, Boyd had said quietly. It doesn't. I crossed a line. But so did you, a long time ago, when you decided that loyalty meant ownership. Vince had stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You have no idea what line I'm willing to cross now, Boyd. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. Boyd had backed away. So what happens now? You destroy me like you did them? Take everything I have? I don't have much left for you to take. No, Vince had said, pulling out his phone. I don't need to destroy you myself. You did that the moment you helped them. He'd pressed play on a recording, Boyd's voice clearly audible as he instructed Melanie on how to access Vince's financial accounts. I've already sent this to the police, Vince had informed him calmly. They'll be here within the hour. Conspiracy charges, same as Melanie and Blaze. You'll face the same consequences they did. Boyd's face had crumpled. Vince, please. We've known each other since we were kids. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for everything, Vince had replied coldly. That's why your betrayal can't be forgiven. He'd left Boyd there, waiting for the authorities, the weight of his choices crushing him more thoroughly than any revenge Vince could have designed. Now, as Vince watched the sun sink below the mountains, his phone rang. Howard. It's done, the attorney said without preamble. Boyd took a plea deal. 18 months and full cooperation with the ongoing cases against Melanie and Blaze. Good, Vince said simply. The house has sold, Howard continued. Closed escrow today. You made a substantial profit, even in this market. Vince nodded, though Howard couldn't see him. The house had too many memories now. He'd build something new, something untainted. And the business restructuring? Complete. You now own controlling interest in Blaze's former company at pennies on the dollar. The board was eager to disassociate from him completely. Perfect. There was a pause before Howard spoke again. What now, Vince? You've won. They've all paid for what they did to you. Where does this end? Vince considered the question, watching as the last light faded from the mountaintops, leaving them in shadow. It already has, he said finally. Justice has been served. But at what cost? Howard pressed. You've lost your wife, your oldest friend. I lost nothing, Vince interrupted. I discovered the truth about people who were never what they claimed to be. That's not a loss. It's clarity. After hanging up, Vince remained on the deck until stars appeared in the darkening sky. Sophia's words returned to him, about revenge consuming him, costing him a part of himself. Was she right? Had this vendetta changed him? No, he decided. It hadn't changed him. It had revealed him, his capacity for calculated retribution, his refusal to forgive betrayal, his absolute commitment to justice as he defined it. Some might call it ruthlessness. Vince preferred to think of it as integrity. He'd confronted deception with truth, betrayal with consequences. He'd rebuilt his life on a foundation of hard lessons rather than comforting illusions. The next morning, Vince signed the final paperwork to acquire Blaze's former company. As the previous owner's name was literally painted over on the office door, a sense of completion washed over him. Melanie had wished him dead. Blaze had planned to steal his life's work. Boyd had betrayed decades of friendship. All three had learned the same harsh lesson. Vince Cordova did not forgive. He did not forget. And he never, ever lost. Standing in his new office, overlooking the city where he'd been both betrayed and vindicated, Vince allowed himself a rare smile. The past was ashes. But from those ashes, he would build something stronger, something unbreakable, just as he always had. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.